Hello, everyone. I'm April Farrell, and we're gonna wait for about 30 seconds to a minute as people kind of trickle in and get registered. So hang tight, and we'll get this started in a minute. James, we've got you here too, right?
I am here. Good morning, everybody.
See how the participant look. Let's see. Yeah, people are coming in. Good. All right. Making sure it's working. It's always the technical difficulties are always the thing you're most afraid of. So that's a good sign. I know we called this Java with James. Do you actually have any coffee?
I do. I went and got some specifically for this.
Good. Okay, we'll just give it a few more minutes here.
I like your little animal ornaments on the wall behind you.
Oh, I know. It's the
those are really cool. Those from the museum store?
They're actually not, but it's I use them to kind of hang. Well, these days I've kind of been hanging masks on them. But yeah, it's the twist on the old heads on the wall thing. But thank you. Okay, so I think let's check the list one more time, see how we're looking here. And I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So, hello everyone again. I'm April Farrell. I'm the Senior Membership and Annual Giving Manager, and I have James Patoka with us, who's our Director of Facilities. And
hello.
This is Coffee with Colleagues. When we all kind of got sent home 3 months ago or 4 months ago to work from home, one of the things we kind of realized we all missed was each other and kind of connecting and having that comradeship with each other. So this idea kind of percolated. Sorry about that. That it would be fun to kind of connect in this way and to really share the wealth of stories and information about the museum that goes on behind the scenes that as a member or a visitor you may not get to hear. So this is our second iteration. It's a very casual conversation. My cat may walk through, so I apologize if that happens, but we are all at home. And we've compiled a couple of questions that we think will kick off some really interesting conversation, but please use the chat feature. You can submit questions in the Q&A, and we'll either be able to kind of feed those in live or have a section at the end where we can go through any of those questions. So let us begin with what may seem like a silly question, but what is a Director of Facilities do? What is that job? What does it entail?
Well, it may be easier to answer what doesn't a facilities director do. So, especially in our case, our main function is the care and protection and maintenance of our physical plant facilities. Without our facilities, obviously, we wouldn't have gallery spaces to exhibit art in, and that's our basic function as a museum. So that's really our main function. Outside of that, we are always relied upon as just general support across the organization. Anytime there's a special project that comes up, when one of those things like, well, who's gonna do this, or who has the capabilities of doing something like this, it often falls to the facilities department. So it makes for really interesting days, really interesting work. There's a lot of different ways that we get to interact, or I get to interact with different aspects of the museum on a daily basis that I would have never expected when I first started this position. Actually, when I first started as facilities manager back about 12 years ago now. So it's still weird to me to think how far back my memories can go.
Which is 24 years at this point, right?
It's 20, as of the end of February this year, it hit 24 years. And one of the interesting facts that I think all the staff know, but a lot of other people don't know, I was actually hired on Leap Day of 1996, February 29th. So my 6-year technical anniversary was this year when I hit 24 years. So that's kind of, kind of fun. It's been a really interesting ride.
And what are the facilities that you oversee? I mean, I think most people watching would think of the two locations. We have MCSD in La Jolla, and we have our downtown campus as well. But are there other facilities?
We have actually two downtown campuses directly across the street from each other. So there's those. We also have our storage facility, which is located down in Chula Vista, where we house most of our collection. So that's probably one of the biggest responsibilities right there. And then we also have a couple of residential properties, one of those being a historic landmark that we own, the museum owns, and that I manage for the museum. So several properties.
Nice. That's probably more than most people realize.
Yeah.
So how did you, James Patoka, end up in this field and in this job? I'm curious to know how you ended up here.
Well, I actually was born in Long Beach, and I was raised in Tennessee. After getting out of high school, I realized that Tennessee didn't really have much to offer me. Most of my family lived out here in the West Coast. My mom had moved out here to the San Diego area and had been bugging me for a while to move out. So one day I just decided I had had enough of the Tennessee life, and I packed up everything I owned and put my car on a trailer, and over Christmas Eve and Christmas Day of 1995, I moved across country and moved out here to San Diego. I kind of had a job waiting for me when I got out here, and that's where the connection started. That job was with a company that was doing both overnight security and custodial services for the museum during the last remodel, the Venturi remodel. So I started technically going on to the museum property at the end of 1995, the very end of 1995. I worked for that company for a couple of years, and one day, as I was doing the overnight security, I was handing the building back over to the current chief of security at that point, and he just out of the blue said, "Hey, would you like a job when this place opens?" He said, "I'm looking for some security guards," and I said, "Sure, sounds like fun." And that's basically how it all began.
Wow.
It's almost as if the museum sought me out in a way. Yeah. That's kind of how I look at it.
So in your kind of day-to-day process, or even over the course of a year, what are some of the tasks that you enjoy the most, or you find the most interesting and challenging?
That's a tough one. Probably just the day-to-day operations of the museum, you know, the overseeing that everything is running smoothly, because nothing helps me sleep better at the end of the day than knowing that we went through the day without any problems, any issues, and that anything that did come up was handled in a timely manner and in a professional manner, and that we're all happy in the end. Because the facilities business is a service business. You know, our staff is our customer, so we like to make our staff happy, because happy staff means everyone's getting along and everything is going smoothly, and that's overall what we want.
One side note, thank you for always. Side note is to thank you for always responding to our "it's too cold in here" or "it's too hot in here" complaint. You're always very on that. So. One of the questions I think is interesting personally to me, and I think others might find interesting too, is how the facilities team and department interacts with our curatorial team, say perhaps during the installation of a show, or before or after something like that goes on.
Well, there's a lot of logistics work that goes into an installation, as I'm sure everyone can imagine. I know that our previous conversation with colleagues, participant Tom Callis mentioned it. I'm involved a lot in that planning process, more in the building access and making sure that the install teams have access to the things they need, the spaces that they need. That is also the time where we will organize any kind of major maintenance or any kind of major cleanings of the building. So it's working logistically with the install team and the curatorial team in general to make all of that stuff happen seamlessly, because we have such a small window of time to do these show turnovers, that everyone really kind of needs to work together and be on the same page. And, I've spent my career as, facilities manager into facilities director, really kind of trying to build that relationship with the curatorial team, because in the end, it's the two of our teams who are really there to showcase what we are as a museum in the end, in the gallery space themselves. So there's, like I said, a lot of logistic stuff. Working side by side with Tom in the care of our storage facility down in Chula Vista is a really big thing. Tom and I are currently working together and kind of coming up with ideas and how we can improve the space. Because one of our constant battles is always climate. Everybody thinks that Southern California is great. We don't have any climate worries, but that's not the case, especially nowadays with climate change and everything. So it has become more of a thing that we have to be concerned with and really keep our eyes on. And being a nonprofit organization presents challenges because in an ideal world we would have a lot of money where we could have these really awesome, robust HVAC systems, but in the reality of what we live in, we can't do that. So we have to really kind of work together closely to figure out how to fine tune our systems and get those settings where we want them and that kind of thing.
All right, I think we have a question here. Christopher Hines is saying hello, I believe. If you have a question, if you can submit it through the Q&A, we'll be able to get to that. And kind of continuing on with the Cholla facility, I think there's a lot of mystique around it and everyone is kind of fascinated by it because it does house our permanent collection. Does that kind of pressure, I mean, I would imagine that building has a lot of kind of serious things that you have to kind of focus on. Is the HVAC and the climate kind of the primary one that keeps you up at night, or?
Yes. Yeah. For me, it definitely is. It's a constant worry because the care of our collection is really of utmost importance, especially in that facility, because that's where all of it lives. So that kind of thing keeps me up at night. What used to keep me up at night actually isn't going to keep me up at night anymore, which was leaks and stuff like that in an older building with the La Jolla facility. But now that it's under construction and remodel, we're not going to have to worry about that anymore. So I'll get a little bit more sleep. But yeah, I would say overall across all of our buildings, HVAC is probably the biggest concern.
Yeah. So I wanted to kind of move into, oh, actually, here's our question coming through. Okay. Working late nights in La Jolla, have you ever seen or heard anything strange, like ghosts? All right, I'm going to put that question on hold because we are going to get to that. I know that's everyone's.
Yeah,
well, maybe not
ask that kind of thing.
Know about that. But so I have this here, which is a little X logo that you made for staff members. I believe it was from a tree on the property that had fallen over, and instead of kind of just binning it, you made these beautiful little tokens for the staff. And that made me want to ask you kind of about your creative side working in a museum. I'm imagining you have, well, I know you have a creative side, and I'd love to hear more about kind of some of the projects you've worked on for us here.
Yeah, my passion outside of obviously what I do for the museum, my one big passion is actually woodworking, as you can probably tell from what April showed. That is something that I have been doing since I was about 8 years old. I believe my mother has a photo of somewhere of me as an 8-year-old with a saw and building my first birdhouse when I lived in Long Beach. So that's really kind of it's what gives me peace outside of the turmoil of the world, because I can lose myself in a woodworking project. One of the great things with working with the museum is that passion of mine has been tapped many times, and I really love doing the projects that I've been asked to do. The X that you have, that was from one of our Melaleuca trees in the garden in La Jolla. That unfortunately one of the branches was broken off when we had a school group come out. They didn't realize they couldn't sit on it, so it snapped off. Luckily nobody got hurt or anything, but we decided instead of trashing it, we decided to make the tokens for the museum. So that kind of started off a lot of the projects. So since then, I've done another project which involved the mahogany ribs that were inside of Sherwood Auditorium that lined all of the walls of the auditorium. Our director had approached me about making some little tokens to give to certain people, and I took some of those. I actually have one here that I saved. It's not finished or anything, but I took those ribs from the museum and had them engraved as a token, for them. And then another one I had done, which more recently, which was a lot of fun, a lot of hard work, but it was a lot of fun. I actually have some pictures here I can share. What started off as, here we go, as a pile of rock. I had chosen a couple rocks out of that pile. These were hard rock pieces that were encountered in the construction of La Jolla, as you kind of tell the construction equipment in the background there. We had encountered that hard.
A quick question, just to interrupt quickly. For those of us who may not be familiar, what is hard rock? What does that mean?
Basically granite.
Okay.
That's what I would classify it as, granite. It's about the same hardness and everything. So that's what we're looking at. I took those and turned them into these. So we took a couple of pieces of that, which were about 200-300 pounds a piece. We then went to work at them with sledgehammers and drills and chisels and broke them up into these small pieces that you see here. I then hired a local Chula Vista engraver to engrave our logo there on them, and then lined the bottom of each one of those with felt. So kind of made a little fancy paperweight out of them. So projects like that are what make my job fun. When I get to do stuff like that, it breaks up the day-to-day monotony. Not that my job is monotonous at all. That's one of the reasons I've actually been at the museum for so long, is because really no 2 days are the same. The only time it's been that way is actually recently with the quarantine. So days at home tend to kind of blend together. But outside of that, my days change almost every day. So it keeps things interesting.
Do you have the picture of the trophy? That's one other thing I think is kind of fun.
Oh yeah, I do.
Our team at the museum, we do like to kind of get competitive with each other occasionally. And for this is the desk decorating one, right?
Yeah.
So the last couple of years, we have done holiday desk decorating divided up by office. And James made this really fun trophy, again, kind of with a nod to Sherwood. And each year a team wins it and gets to keep it for the year in their department. I believe James's team won last year.
Yeah. Our the building department, or the admin department, business office.
So, but this trophy has now become coveted, and it moves around the building and sits on different people's desks as the years go by. But that's kind of a personal insider one that I thought was fun to share.
Yeah, that was a fun one to build. Actually, it was a fun one to come up with an idea, because I just started with a pile of those rib pieces and was like, okay, now what am I going to do? And I just started kind of fiddling with them, and I came up with that idea just out of the blue. So, but the other fun part about it is the vase that we found that fits in the center of it. So now we actually can use it as a flower vase as well. So,
if we ever go back to the office, that is.
Yeah, it's still sitting there.
So we did have a question about this that I think was a question that we were going to ask you about. As visitors and members, you probably come to our La Jolla location many times, but what I found fascinating when I started working there is that there's so much more than meets the eye. There are so many storage nooks and crannies and underground tunnels. And I was going to ask you, what is, some of the most interesting things about our La Jolla location that the average visitor or member may not know? And I have a feeling I know which way this is going to go.
One of the most interesting things I've actually been discovering throughout the remodel process of La Jolla is how many little hidden areas there are in the museum, which are created from previous remodels and things like that, which kind of explain a lot of stories that I was told over the years. We had heard stories many times when I was in security about, people hearing phones ringing inside of walls and things like that. So that's really one of probably the most interesting things that I have encountered that people ask me outside of the museum is all of the stories about, is the museum haunted? So I am I don't know where I lie on it, because I have experienced some things that would make me wonder. I have seen some things that have made me wonder. For example, I remember one time locking up the museum in the middle of the night, probably about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I thought I was the only one in the building, and I distinctly heard someone call my name while I was going through the basement. I have seen things float across the screen in the security monitor at night, back in the day, but you know, I've heard a lot of stories. Like I said, I've experienced a lot of stuff, so people can draw their own conclusion. But I always, when I'm there at night, I always say hello to Ellen.
Yeah, Ellen is the most, I think, famous figure that I think people believe is still at the facility. So
Yeah. I would like to think that she likes me because I take care of her building.
probably true.
Yeah.
I think next I wanted to ask you if you've had kind of a highlight in your career here at the museum, and what would that be?
Probably the biggest highlight in my career so far has been being asked to join Nancy Rubin's team. She asked me, I think it was in 2006, when they were at the museum in La Jolla building the boat piece off the Paradise Point boat piece off the back of the museum, which I know everyone has seen. As part of facilities, this is one of the times where we were facilitating curatorial, because at the time there was a show change going on as well. So the curatorial team weren't able to help out with the construction of that piece because of that. So it defaulted kind of to the facilities team to provide the extra manpower for wiring up the boats and everything. So in working with them, they just approached me one day and said, "Hey, we realize that you get along great with the crew. You get what's going on, just like that. And would you like to join our team?" And I'm like, "Okay, cool." You know, I'm in my, I think late 20s at that point. I don't remember how old it was, but I just thought it'd be cool. So from that point, we went on to go and do 4 more of her pieces. We did one in New York, which actually we built, and then 6 weeks later came back and tore down. So that was the only one that I've ever done where we did it both ways. We did one at a private residence in LA, and then we did one in Las Vegas, which is still there, right outside the Aria Hotel. That one was actually probably one of the most challenging. That was a 6-week. I got to live in Vegas for 6 weeks, helping to build that. It was a really incredible experience. So I have a couple of pictures here that I can share. Here is obviously our one in La Jolla. So we had all kinds of scaffolding built underneath that thing. I think that one also took almost 6 weeks to build. And it was a really incredible experience, because all the boats were staged in the parking lot on the north end of the building, and we had to hire a very, very large crane which was kind of crazy for the job, because the boats aren't heavy, but it's because of the reach. It had to reach all the way over the building. And I remember Nancy standing down on the Coast Boulevard at the seawall, and as these boats were coming over and we're all hanging out in the art piece on the armature, she would just kind of be like, "Okay, put it there and then turn it this way," or "Okay, no, move it back, or try turning it the other way." And we're up there flipping these things around. And then once she would say, "Okay, that's it," then we start wiring. And that is actually one of the most interesting aspects of those, obviously, is how they're wired up. The way that all the wires create cross tension on each other, so that the whole piece is very, very sturdy. There's one particular boat in our piece where at one point there were 5 of us sitting in the boat as it's suspended there. So it's very strong. I've seen it in some really high winds as well. The whole structure moves, but none of the boats themselves move. And here's a picture of me inside one of the boats. Obviously, this is the one that we did in New York at the Lincoln Center. This is the one that we built and then came back and took down. this was an interesting project because it actually happened overnight. As everyone knows, New York is really, really busy during the day. So we couldn't have cranes and boats flying around during the day. So we came and we started about 9 o'clock at night and work until about 6 o'clock in the morning. So this is just after sunrise in the morning. But that was a really, really fun experience. That was the first time I got to experience New York. So that definitely made me want to go back.
New York at night, no less.
New York at night. It's a totally different experience because in the morning, as we're going back to our hotel, New York's starting to come alive. And by the time we've taken a shower and look out the window, it's like just people everywhere. But at night, it's like a ghost town, at least where we were. And then this one here, this is a picture of the one at the private residence in LA. This was just a fun piece because, you know, the setting was really nice. It was kind of in a wooded area, really nice home. So it was a lot of fun. So, you know, getting to do that for a few years was really a really big highlight in my life. I've gotten to work, thankfully, with a lot of artists over the years, and that's always a really fun experience. You know, it's fun to see how their mind works and kind of getting, because it causes me to kind of get a little more creative in some of the things that I do as well. You know, it inspires creative thinking.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
One last question I had before we dive into some of the questions that our visitors have been putting through. What role are you playing in the new construction in La Jolla? I know everyone's probably aware and excited that that building is coming along, but what is your role there?
I feel I have two really big roles. The biggest one tied to current job is just kind of being there and knowing what systems are going into the building, how things are being constructed, so that I can see everything from the maintenance standpoint of things. Because once this building is built, then they're just kind of basically going to hand it over to me and say, okay, now it's yours to take care of. So sitting in the meetings and you know, just really getting all the nitty gritty details on how everything is being done is one of the most important things, I think. The other thing is just being the source of historic knowledge of the building. Because as you know, we're adding on to a building that has been added on to many, many times. So in my course of, prior to being facilities manager, I was actually a facilities technician. So I was spent years working on the building and learning all the nooks and crannies of the building. So having that knowledge has been really beneficial in the construction process, because, you know, I many times get approached by the construction team asking, do I know where this is or where this goes or how this was fed from where, or, you know, that kind of question, which saves a lot of time and money and exploration that they would have to do on their own otherwise. So those are really two of the biggest ways that I'm tied to the construction.
Awesome. All right. We've got questions. All right. He wants, he wants to make sure that, Anthony wants to make sure that you talk about the office decorating trophy. And does the museum host field trips for students to check out facilities and the experience of behind the scenes of things?
That is not something we've ever really been approached to do, but if anyone ever approached me to do that, I would do that. Actually, I take that back. There was one time, and I know David Mesa, who's probably watching this, is sitting there saying, wait. There was one time where we had my son's class, I think he was in 4th grade maybe, they were learning about wood. So I volunteered to have his whole class come to the museum and teach them about wood at the museum's wood shop. So we actually had a class of little kids sitting out there, and we taught them how to make their own MDF, how to make their own plywood. And we actually did a few little samples that they were able to take home that they made themselves. So that was fun. So that's about the extent of what we've had on that aspect. But, you know, if anyone ever came to me and said, hey, I would like to learn more about the behind the scenes, I would love to take people. You know, I'm proud of my buildings, and I do call them my buildings.
Nice. Jenna has said something in the chat about mystery boxes.
that was what I was referring to when I first talked about before I hit the ghost story. as they've gone through the construction process of the museum, there's been a couple of instances of what they call the mystery box 1 and mystery box 2, which are basically just structures that were abandoned during a previous remodel, but because no one knows what they are when they're uncovered during excavation, it's just this concrete structure that's in the ground, and everybody's left scratching their head like, well, what is this? So that's one of the instances where historic knowledge of the buildings come into play, because that's the first step, is ask James, do you know what this is? Like, I have no idea, most of them, but there's been a couple interesting ones that we still don't really know what they were for. Obviously, whatever structure they supported at one point was torn out and redone at some point, but both mystery boxes have been removed, so they're no longer a mystery.
All right. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to share that we didn't cover, or that you think people would like to know? I think most of our questions have been answered at this point.
I think so. I'll share one more photo. This is a recent photo, kind of give a little teaser to everyone of the construction in La Jolla. So this was just last week or week before last. So this is in the basement of, or the bottom area of what would have been the Sherwood Auditorium. So kind of give an idea of the level of excavation that has gone on during the construction, and a sense of scale. That's what really impresses me every time I go to the museum in La Jolla. And I try to go at least once a week, if not every couple of weeks, to take a lot of pictures. And that's what I'm known as, the guy walking around taking pictures all the time, because I want to know and be able to answer in the future, where does this go? Where does that feed? So this is how I'll find out.
Awesome. Well, are there any more questions out there that anyone would like to know? We're going to probably wrap up. We're trying to keep these short and sweet, but I appreciate the time and the information, James. I think it's so fun to learn things that I don't even know about you. So thank you. Feel free to ask anytime. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you at the next one. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye.